Immediately following Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's speech on the 70th anniversary of World War II, the world voiced their opinion. The White House released their statement, which read in part, "We welcome Prime Minister Abe's expression of deep remorse for the suffering caused by Japan during the World War II era, as well as his commitment to uphold past Japanese government statements on history. We also value Prime Minister Abe's assurances of Japan's intent to expand upon its contributions to international peace and prosperity in the years ahead. For 70 years, Japan has demonstrated an abiding commitment to peace, democracy, and the rule of law. This record stands as a model for nations everywhere." Peter Kuznick, a history professor at American University in Washington, D.C., called Abe a notorious historical falsifier. Abe's remarks are a bland statement that neither accepts responsibility for Japan's past aggression in a way that will satisfy China, the Koreas, and other victims of Japanese atrocities, nor does it infuriate Japan's right-wing nationalists who form the backbone of Abe's supporters. He is remilitarizing Japan. He is effectively consigning Japan's peace constitution to the dustbin of history, which understandably alarms all of Japan's neighbors. Those are two very different opinions of the Prime Minister's remarks, and like everything in life, one must peel through multiple layers to get close to the truth. So let's take a look at these layers. Let's take a look at the speech. Now, when you look at the language that Prime Minister Abe used, it is exactly 100% what one should have expected. It's actually what he said he was going to do. The speech itself was written for domestic audiences. It was written for his supporters. And anyone who takes a look at the actual speech itself can see that. It's who he needs to play to. In fact, Abe also was sure to include language that would satisfy the United States. The people who he does not care about would be those overseas, namely those in Beijing and China, and Seoul and South Korea. And really, why would he? Placating Seoul, placating Beijing doesn't help him. Abe said there would be no new apology, and he stuck to his guns. And you know what? This will probably actually help him in the long run, because he'll be seen as someone who does not capitulate to outside influences. Now, what Abe said with regard to history and war was just enough to make the United States happy. It's also not going to anger anyone in the Nippon Keigi, which is a very right-wing revisionist group that Abe is affiliated with. Like Abe, this group feels that Japan has done absolutely nothing wrong with regards to its past activities. Sadly, the United States needs Japan in the region, so they also are not going to call Abe out, at least not directly. Okay, now with Abe not issuing a new apology, China and South Korea have said they will start judging Japan on its actions. Come on. This is something that I said way back in 2013. Apologies with no actions are not apologies. When someone apologizes, the person who receives that apology has the power to determine whether or not the apology is valid. If there are no actions to accompany those words, then in fact, the apology is empty. Empty words were spoken. South Korea and China need to stop asking for apologies. If you look over the past 70 years, Japan has issued more than 50 apologies since the end of the war. Now, if you're continuously asking for new apologies, then you seem to believe that the past apologies, the past words that were uttered are not sufficient. It's time to demand action, not more words, because Japan can continuously keep uttering apologies, keep uttering words, but after 70 years, no one is happy. So why keep on doing it? Japan committed horrific atrocities during the war and needs to face that fact head on. It, as a nation, needs to look squarely at the past and tear down anything that remotely justifies the warmongering that took place. South Korea and China also need to drop a list of actions and hold Japan accountable on making progress towards those tasks. The time for apologies has long gone, and to many, the incessant calls for new apologies sounds like whining. So while we're on the subject of history, let's talk about the Yasukuni Shrine. Immediately following the World War II address the next day on August 15th, a couple of lawmakers went there, Abe made his ritual offering, and even his wife went there over the weekend. The knee-jerk reactions from Beijing and Seoul also need to stop. Their reactions don't help the situation. Yes, there are war criminals enshrined at Yasukuni. And yeah, when Abe sends an offering or anyone affiliated with the Nippon Keigi goes to the Yasukuni Shrine, they probably are honoring those war criminals. But you know what? There is no alternative in place to honor everyone else who is enshrined there. Remember, bus drivers, school teachers, animals are also enshrined at Yasukuni. The souls of everyone who died in service of the emperor dating back to the Meiji era is there. And their souls can't be ripped out of the shrine and put someplace else. People aren't going to stop going to the shrine because it has a huge significance. So a more constructive way needs to be developed to deal with this. And I think a good place to start would be to tear down the Yushukan, or the blatant propaganda museum that sits on the shrine's grounds. For me, that would be a huge step in the right direction. Unfortunately, even if Japan started on these particular tasks, it may not be enough to improve relations. There is a deep resentment against Japan that to some extent has been adopted as part of China's and South Korea's national identity. Now, this doesn't typically extend to a Japanese citizen, but does extend towards the government and its policies. And this is what I mean by that. If a politician in South Korea experiences a little hiccup, they simply need to blame Japan, and their rankings in the polls will go up. That, my friends, is equally as bad and does absolutely nothing to move the dialogue forward. So let us not forget that despite all of this squabbling, these three East Asian powerhouses have an extremely functional working relationship, and a lot of what we see is theatrics. All right, I've said my piece, I've shared my opinion, and now I'd love to hear yours. So please, don't be shy and speak up.